Hello, everyone, and welcome to Technology Tuesday, hosted by Out of the Box Technology. We're so excited to bring you these free webinars each and every week that focus on what we're doing here at Out of the Box Technology, as well as introducing you to some of our friends from the industry and tips and tricks from in and outside of QuickBooks. My name is Jennifer. I will be your moderator today. If you have any questions as we go through the presentation, you can go ahead and send those over to me via the chat box there on your GoToWebinar control panel, and I'll be sure to either answer them myself if I can, or we'll save them to the end with a question and answer session. A little bit about Out of the Box Technology, if you haven't joined us before or if it's been a while. We are a firm that has a whole team of QuickBooks trainers. We do integrations, hosting, and support around all versions of QuickBooks. We do bookkeeping services, including recurring bookkeeping services. And we have a whole development team that does data migrations, custom app development, website design, and more. Some really exciting news. Just a couple weeks ago, it was announced that we made the Inc. 5000 one of the top fastest growing companies in America. We were really excited to be on that list for the first time at spot number 540, which out of 5,000 is pretty exciting for us here over at Out of the Box Technology. Another bit of news is surrounding our Tech Tuesday. Starting in September, most of our Technology Tuesday presentations will be allowing us to offer you continuing education credits. So take a look when you're registering for these. If it has the little CPE sign on there, by attending that session live, you will get credit towards whatever your credentials may be that accept CPEs. So enough of the housekeeping details that we have there. Today we have our Recur360 quarterly update. This was rescheduled from earlier in the month, so we do apologize for the delay in that. But as Barb will go over today, there's actually been a lot of really exciting stuff in the last 2 weeks. So it worked out really well. With unfortunately, there was technical difficulties a couple weeks ago, but we are here today with a lot more information. So again, very exciting. And with that, I am going to hand things over to Barb so that she can dive right into what's been going on with Recur360.
Hi, everybody. Let me go ahead and share my screen here, and I will make sure that sharing my screen that's logged into Recur360.
Perfect. Looks great.
So everybody should be able to see my screen. Okay. So I'm going to cover some of the features that have been updated since our last quarterly update. And then, as Jennifer mentioned, we've had some exciting things go on in the last 2 weeks, which is I'm going to have a preview for you of the release that we are going to put out probably the end of next week, just after the first of the month, which is going to include some features like new user logins and security settings, the ability to edit invoices, and the ability to create one-time invoices within Recur360. So those are 3 big things that we've been working on really hard and are finally about ready for the public. They're in final testing right now. So as far as what has happened and what is live on the site today, some of the general updates are, if you log into your Recur360 account, we have a summary email now. So under the settings menu in your account, you can ask Recur360 to send you a summary of activities that have happened. So you can tell it that you would like to have that email go out every, sorry, they moved it on me now that we put everything in here. It's under the notifications menu. I was incorrect for the new update. You can have the system send you an email daily, weekly, or monthly that shows you how many transactions were sent out. So you could see how many emails were sent by Recur360, how many invoices were sent by Recur360, how many were processed for payment, and how much credit card processing you did versus ACH processing you did. So you'll get those so you don't have to log into Recur360 to find out what's happened on a daily basis, a weekly basis, or a monthly basis. And that is the notifications update. The next thing that's already released and ready is under the email settings. you have the ability now to customize the pay online link that goes out with customer emails. So some of our clients didn't like the link that said, click here now to pay your invoice. So you can, under this link text area, change what that is going to say. So whenever you send an email to a client, instead of it saying, and that's an invitation email, sorry, instead of it saying, click here to view pay your invoices, you can make it say whatever you would like for it to say. You can also do some other options here in the email settings with regard to how those emails go out. You can tell Recur360 to hide the Recur360 transaction ID on the invoices that go out. Again, a lot of clients, because that is a long ID number and a randomly generated unique number, were having challenges that their customers were using that as a reference number, and it was hard to look up or it was too many digits. So now you have the ability to check it off, and when the email goes out of Recur360, the Recur360 transaction ID will not appear, but the QuickBooks invoice number will show. And again, like we've always had, in conjunction with that, if you're using that and you're sending emails from Recur360 and you're connected to QuickBooks Desktop, then you would want to turn on the option to hold the email until the invoice number has been assigned by QuickBooks. Otherwise, it won't have an invoice number when that is initially generated because it hasn't synced to QuickBooks yet and gotten the number issued. So very important if you're on desktop, if you're going to check this option, to also check the option above it to hold the email until the invoice number gets assigned. Okay. And the last new option in the email areas is the ability for you to hide the invoice lines themselves on the email that goes out. So the item here, we moved it up to the top. If you'd like to hide the item name and codes is an option. And then to be able to hide the line items themselves from the body of the email. The attached PDF is always going to have the line item detail. And if you choose to turn off the invoice lines on the body of the email, they will just see the total of the amount of the email in that body. And then they'll have to open the attached PDF to see the line item detail. Okay. Next new feature that's available and live in the system is with regard to the ability to void an invoice out of Recur360. Traditionally, we have always maintained that any edits of invoices or voiding of invoices has to be done directly in QuickBooks, and then you need to let that sync back over to Recur360. And we've modified that now. So if you would like to, in Recur360, you can open an invoice. And today, as you'll see it, there'll be a void invoice button down here on the bottom left-hand corner. We're in my Sandbox account right now, which is connected to the new updates. So as of the next update being applied, that void invoice button is going to move from where it is now in this left-hand corner up into the top right. There is now an options menu. So under the options menu, you have the ability to void the invoice. And then that will mark that invoice as voided in QuickBooks. So the invoice will still show, but it will be voided. And Recur360 will update that for you automatically. Okay. Then we have a few other minor updates with regards to how the screens look in Recur360. One of the big ones is under the invoice area in customers. If you were to look up a customer that has open invoices with you, in the invoice area in the top right corner, you're going to see some icons next to the invoice date. So an invoice date with a green check mark means that invoice has been fully paid in QuickBooks and it's good, it's cleared. Any invoices like this one for June 10th that have a clock icon next to them mean that that is a currently open unpaid invoice that is not yet past its due date. This one is due on September the 8th. So I still have time remaining on this one. And then let me go back to one of my other customers here who has a big balance as well, because the last icon that shows up in there is my cash sale customer who's way past due. So all of his invoices have a red exclamation mark next to them, meaning that they are still open invoices and they are past their due date. So just a little bit more visibility and a quick way to catch your eye on things so that you know how those invoices are doing in your collections area. Okay. Then I have a few updates that are specific to QuickBooks Desktop, and this is our QuickBooks Desktop connected account in my test system here for OOTB. We do have the ability now to, when you are creating a new customer in Recur360, you always, if you were a QuickBooks Desktop customer, had to add the new customer using the Add New button at the top, and then you had to wait until that customer information synced over to QuickBooks before you could add a payment detail. So now we've added the ability to add them both right away in one screen and get it all taken care of with one Save and Sync button. Okay. Also related to QuickBooks Desktop, we do realize that some clients have to move or relocate their QuickBooks company file, or maybe they make a backup and change the name of the company file. So we've added the ability for you to reset the path of where the QuickBooks company file is located. Now, Recur360 connected to QuickBooks Desktop is dependent upon the QuickBooks Web Connector program. So generally speaking, in conjunction with you needing to reset the company file path, you would most likely also need to disconnect the Web Connector from where it was on the previous computer that you were running it, and decide which computer you're going to run it on now, and then re-download the Web Connector and reconnect it to the QuickBooks company file. Previously, if you did that, there were some challenges as if the company file path changed and you needed to contact us for support, and we had to do that for you. So now we've given everybody the ability to reset it themselves. And if you click on that, it's going to erase where the current company file location is, which I can always see right here now. You can tell where it's looking for the company file. And I can reset it and change it and update it. So that's something that you guys can handle on your own now without having to contact us for support. Okay. So now that is really a lot of the big updates that happened in the last quarter and some of those new features that have come on board. We didn't do a lot of updates in the last quarter because of the fact that we were working on both some security requirements that we had to do with Intuit regarding our site and these big new features that were coming. So now I'm going to go ahead and start those and go over those and how those work in Recur360. Probably the biggest thing that we've added is user logins and user securities. So traditionally in Recur360, we told you that everybody uses the same email address and the same password to log into Recur360. And everybody can be logged in at the same time, but they're all using that same login information. Which means if you logged in using your Intuit Merchant Services account for that single sign-on feature and ease of use, that everybody had to have access to your Intuit login and your Intuit password. Clients didn't like that. And also we wanted to give you the flexibility to be able to add a new user and limit what that user could see and do. So that's the big part of this new feature. So under our logins menu, you have the ability, you can see I've added a few new users here. So you can add a new user in the top right. And when you choose to do that, the basic information that you have to fill out is a first name, a last name, an email address. You can skip phone number for now. It'll ask them to input that when you invite them. But the email address is critical because that's going to be where the invitation gets sent to, and that's going to be the login that the new user uses to log into Recur360. So whatever email address you put there needs to be the email address that they can receive from and that they can log in with. Then we get into the permissions area of what this user can do. Okay? And there's a bunch of options here. The selections menu has to deal with if they can see these menu choices on the left-hand side of the screen. And the default with everything for a new user is that they have access to all of those features. Okay. But I can limit that if I click the radio button here, and I can say, okay, this person can see, I don't want them in the reports, let's say, and I don't want them to be able to edit invoices, which is another new feature, and I don't want them in any of the settings options. Okay, so that would remove their capabilities for those menu choices over here on the left-hand side of the screen. Also, if I want them to be able to maybe look at recurring payments, the menu choice, to see what's in there, but I don't want them to edit any of them, I'd want to check that off as well. And that would limit their capabilities there. Then, after I finish with the sections, I get into the individual areas, because once they get to the detail of that, if they're allowed the customer's menu, then I can decide what they can do inside of that menu as well. Again, default to they have access to all customers in the system, but I can restrict it where I can say they can have a limited view of customers, where maybe it matches any of the following criteria. So as long as one of these three things is true, then they would be able to see that customer. And the options are, if their login created that customer, because we now track which user created a customer record, then they'd be able to see it. Or if they were a certain customer type from my customer types list in QuickBooks. So I can check it off there where they can match any of the following or not matching certain ones. So if I want them to be able to see anything that matches, I'm going to look in here and see my list from QuickBooks. So maybe they can see retail clients only. And I want them to see the from advertisement clients. So any customers that were included in those two customer types now, this person, this login, would be able to see those. And lastly, I can limit it by who's the sales rep assigned to that customer. So if I check that off, I'll be able to say, again, anything that is not matching or matching a certain criteria. So if I go to matching, I'm going to be able to see, okay, I only want them to see Jill and the sales consulting company. So now, as long as the customer were to fit in one of these three things, this particular new login that I'm creating would be able to see that customer and click on them and see the details of them. Okay. Then we get to the invoice restrictions that you can do. When a customer is able to, or when this login is able to see invoices, which ones can they see? Again, they have access to all of them, none of them, or I can limit it by certain criteria. If they created it, if the invoice line items or the item level class on the invoice at the top level matches or doesn't match any of these, then I can restrict it to that. Or if it were, again, restricted to a sales rep. So again, if I only want them to see only their own stuff, I would need to limit the customers they can see and the invoices that they can see, and potentially the recurring invoices that they can see. Because keep in mind, if they can see customers, they would be able to see everything in that customer profile screen. So if I limit the customers, but I don't also limit the recurring invoices, just because I maybe took away the recurring invoice section, meaning they can't click the recurring invoice menu choice, if they have access to customers, they would still be able to see the recurring invoices linked to the customers they can see. And therefore, they would be able to click on that recurring invoice from inside of the customer profile screen. So it gets very detailed in how you want to set that up and the restrictions that you want to put on these people if you want to limit what they can see and what they can do. The options for you in limiting their recurring invoices, again, are related to class or rep. Keeping in mind that this is my QuickBooks desktop account, so that's why I'm able to limit by rep. If I go to my QuickBooks Online account, I'm not going to be able to limit recurring invoices by sales rep because QuickBooks Online doesn't really have sales reps. So some of these menu choices may change slightly depending upon whether you're connected to QuickBooks Desktop or QuickBooks Online. Next menu choice for us, or next permissions, are the recurring payments. Again, 3 options: all, none, or limit by certain criteria, meaning this one, the only option I have is they can see recurring invoices that they created for customers they have access to. So all, none, or only their own are your options in recurring payments. Now, if they have access to invoices and recurring invoices under the items, you may also limit what kinds of items they can add to those invoices. And this is very specific in that it is item by item. So more likely, I would say that I'm going to limit this to say things that are not matching, because I don't want them to be able to add maybe the bounce check charge or anything that starts with a discount. So I can start typing descriptions. It'll show you those kinds of items. So they would not be able to add those two kinds of line items to any of my recurring invoices or my regular invoices if I restrict this to not matching here. Okay. Then we get to the other options for terms. I can limit which terms they can apply to a customer or reply to an invoice, as well as, since I'm connected to my QuickBooks Desktop, my classes are going to limit those things for the class level at the top invoice level or the line item level. So I can limit those here. And then sales reps as well. I can limit them from selecting certain sales reps or adding certain sales reps to invoices. Don't want them to be able to use Frank Johnson. And lastly, what accounts this can link to, because the option here is this new user has the ability to create new accounts when they log in. So once they've gotten their login established, they would be able to create new Recur360 accounts under there. Okay. So in this, I can say that I want it to be not matching anything. Oh, I'm sorry. Accounts is more accounts receivable. I'm at the wrong level here. This is the desktop connected account. So in QuickBooks Desktop, when you create a recurring invoice, you get to pick which accounts receivable account that particular recurring invoice goes into. So you can limit this user from being able to select that there. Sorry, I was a little mistaken on that. Now, if I switch to my QuickBooks Online connected Sandbox account and I'm adding a new login, the options change here. I no longer get to limit sales reps, but I can limit the locations that they can choose or pick when they're adding a new recurring invoice or an invoice. And the last option available in the new user setup is to be able to default things for this user when they create a new customer or when they create a new invoice. So if I set these, then automatically any new customer they created or recurring invoice they created would be set to, let's say, due on receipt, because this person's maybe only making real-time invoices that are due right away. Or I could limit the locations that they can select as well. And again, because that's an online account, if I go back to my QuickBooks Desktop connected account, the defaults that I can choose are payment terms, invoice class, default accounts receivable account, and default sales rep. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about what happens once you've created this new user and you've saved it. An invitation goes out to that user. Let me show you the other one, which was my invite. Okay. So that user receives an invitation that says someone has invited you to use Recur360. And they have to click the link to respond to the invitation. Oh, and while we're talking about responding to invitations and inviting new users, you see that my Recur360 account has two QuickBooks company files attached to it. It's got an out-of-the-box desktop connected company account, as well as my Sandbox company, which is connected to QuickBooks Online. And when I create a new user, it is created in that company. So here are my 4 users, Rachel, Jill, George, and Barb, that are able to log into my out-of-the-box desktop account. I have also added Rachel Doe to my Sandbox company account using the exact same email address. So it's Rachel Doe at rdoe123test. So I'm giving Rachel access to both company files. When you do that, it's very important that after they accept the first invitation, that's going to grant them access to the company that they're accepting. So in this case, it would grant them access to the Sandbox company. Then they need to stay logged into Recur360 and accept the second invitation. because that's going to connect the two to the same login credentials, because that's where they assign their password, and they've already gotten their email address. So that way that will give them one login to be able to access both company files just like you do. They'll be able to switch between companies listed right up here at the top. Now, when a new user login accepts the invitation that they got, and they've established their login and their password, you, as the administrator for Recur360, are going to get a notification that the login was accepted. So I know when our doe logged into her new account and when she was accepting of the invitation and she has access to the company files now. So let's see how that works in real time. So if I log out as myself, Barb Fiddler, because I am the original creator of the account, I've got access to everything, and I log in as Rachel, so under my emails, I'm going to pick my, I don't have Rachel saved, rdoe at 123test.com was the email address, and my password is ... She submits that. I'll save that so I have it on my list. And she has access to either one of these accounts. So if she goes in the out-of-box company account, she's got access to everything. Okay, so she can get to reports, she can get to customers, she can get to everything she has access to. If I switch to the Sandbox company account, she still has access to everything. So I've given her that access here when I set her account up. So I can go in here and we can change that access. She's got access to all areas. If I give her access to only the following areas, and let's say I don't want her to be able to get into recurring invoices anymore, or reports, or any of my sync data or push transactions. Okay, then we'll have to log out and log back in, but you'll be able to see the changes of what Rachel can and cannot do now. So now if I log back in as Rachel, and I go to my account there. Oh, forgive me, it was a Sandbox company that I limited. When I go to the Sandbox company account now, she does not have the menu choice for recurring invoices at all. So she can't get to that. She also can't get to the push transactions button or the sync data button. Okay. But she still, again, I didn't limit anything on her in customers. So if she goes to Amy's Bird Sanctuary and she clicks on the customer profile here, she can see the recurring invoice that's in there. She can see all those other options as well. Okay. Now, so that is a lot of detail about user logins, very involved in setting it up, obviously, and very detailed on what you can and cannot do. I would definitely recommend setting up a test user for yourself and making sure that you've got your restrictions set like you want to set them before you maybe send an invitation to an actual user. Lastly, in that same option there as well, if I go back to the out-of-the-box company, which I still gave her access to everything in, under logins, once I have created my new user login, if I go to edit Rachel's account, and I know that I've got all the settings chosen like I want them for her, and I have a second person that I want an exact duplicate of, I can create a duplicate for that. And that will copy all the security settings that are set for Rachel to a new user ID. So it makes it a little bit easier. You don't have to go through all your menu choices and reset everything and remember what you had set them to. That once you've got someone you like, create a duplicate, change the email address that you want to send it to for that new user, and then send that invitation to them. Okay. Now let's get into the details of some of the other features that are coming with the new release. The next one that's been a very popular request has been to be able to do a one-time invoice inside of Recur360 a little bit more easily. Right now, we had told everyone that in order to create a one-time invoice, you create it as a recurring invoice that only recurs one time daily. And then you have to press push transactions and then it would make the invoice. So instead of that, we now have both from the collection center area a Create New Invoices button, or if you click on a customer profile account under the Options menu, you have the ability to create a new invoice there. Either one of those takes you to this same screen here that you're going to see, where I've got options for this invoice. I can set the invoice date, all of my normal settings similar to a recurring invoice for my terms, my class. Make this one due on receipt, and it's going to go into my test email broadcast, and it's going to go to Joe as a sales rep. Another new feature is to be able to put a PO number on an invoice that's going to post to the PO number field in QuickBooks. So that's available to you now, and that will post into QuickBooks. If I want to send an overdue notice, also have my normal options to be able to automatically pay this invoice, okay, and email it to the client. Then you simply add your line items here. So my normal, let's sell them a mouse, if I can type correctly. So we're going to sell them a mouse at $10. I do have some limited variables that I can include in here, like our normal dynamic date variables. They're limited in that I can't do some of the next recurring invoice options because obviously this one is not going to be a recurring invoice. So I can do that here and then save that. Then I simply press the Create Invoice button here. It makes the invoice, pushes the invoice immediately into QuickBooks, and emails that out to the client. Okay, so a lot more streamlined in that creating invoice screen area. Okay. And along with creating that invoice, we now have the ability to edit any invoice that goes into QuickBooks. Okay, so once I've opened this invoice, I can choose to edit that invoice. And let's say this is an invoice that's from 6 months ago and I need to add a late fee. That way you can do it right here within Recur360. So I'm going to add a new line item to it. I don't know if I have a late fee in this database. Nope. So I'll add a non-inventory item here for $15, let's say. Okay. But that would be an easy way to add either a late fee, or if the client said, hey, I want to pay via credit card, you could real-time add a credit card processing fee here and then pay that invoice from the screen as well. Now, next feature that we have kind of related to this being able to edit invoices and add invoices and having user restrictions is you are also going to be able to see who created this invoice now, and that will limit as well who can see this invoice. So this one hasn't synced over to QuickBooks yet, so I don't have my detail information. Let me see if I've got any that I've made recently that might have that created by information here. Let me go to my most recent invoices here. The 21st, I don't know if this one's gotten my test information in it. But if I were to edit this invoice down here, it usually shows up down here in the bottom next to the message displayed in the statement memo area. You would see that this was created by a certain user. Let me switch to my Sandbox account and see if I've got any in there that I've made. I think I did more testing with that one. In my collection center here, I want you to be able to see who created that. They're paid invoices. Okay. So when I look at a customer, though, I would be able to see, if I look at the customer information as well, who had created that customer and who had created those invoices. So in this screen, I'm going to be able to see down at the bottom who created this customer, and I can also update it. I'm not seeing it. It might have moved in an update that they had. Sorry, guys. But for purposes of those restrictions, you're going to know who created a customer account. Let me go back to a customer here, my cash sale customer. I know I've seen it in there in the customer profile. Under options, if I choose to edit customer, I'm going to be able to see down here towards the bottom who created it. And they've moved it again on me. Forgive me, guys. Apparently, I can't see it if I'm logged in as me. We'll find it in another screen. We'll get back to it in just 1 second here. I'm sorry. But the editing invoices is a very nice new feature. And then we do have next an area where you can, under our customer settings, again, some user restrictions or system restrictions. I can go to the account screen here, and I can tell the system that I want to prevent duplicates from being created. So I want to check for duplicates based on the display name field or the account number field when someone's setting up a new account. So that way you prevent the problem of somebody entering what they think is a new customer that might already exist in the system. So you have that duplicate checking feature that'll pop them up a message when they try and save it that customer already exists, as well as you can make certain fields in the customer setting a required field if you do not want them to be able to skip it. So I always want them to enter an email address. I want to make that mandatory. They can't save a customer account without putting in an email address or the billing information. So I want the billing address, city, state, zip code. I want all those to be mandatory where they cannot save that customer again without entering that information. So that way you get your minimums there. And these settings apply to every user that's going to be creating new customers inside of Recur360. Okay. Then our next new feature applies to QuickBooks Online. So I'm going to make sure I switch to that company account. And that's to do with parent and child related accounts inside of Recur360. In QuickBooks, you can create a sub account under a customer, that parent-child relationship for billing purposes. And we now have the ability to mark an account to be billed with the parent, meaning the sub account, instead of it invoicing that, so like my Freedman Sporting Goods, and then I have Ocean View Road under that, and I got Freeman Sporting Goods with 55 Twin Lake. So if I go to that particular customer, the child account here that I call it, the related 55 Twin Lane, and I go under options and I edit that customer, there is a drop down over here in the customer area. I can see who the parent is, and I can choose to either bill it directly to this customer, meaning this customer's address, this customer's email, everything is related to this particular customer record, or I can tell it to bill it with the parent, meaning anytime I create an invoice or creating a recurring invoice, the invoice information as far as the bill to, the email that it's going to go to and everything is going to be linked to the parent now. Okay. Now, you need to be aware then that the email that goes out of Recur360, again, goes to the email address that is linked to Freedman Sporting Goods. Okay. And then it is also set to, when the email gets to that particular parent, the pay online link that they get is only to see invoices that are related to 55 Twin Lane. So if the parent is getting invoices from their own account, Freeman Sporting Goods, and they're getting invoices from Ocean Drive, and they're getting invoices from Twin Lane, then they're going to get 3 different invoices that have 3 different pay online links. So they would have to specifically go to the pay online link for 55 Twin Lane to pay invoices for that account. We are working down the road potentially to have the parent be able to see invoices to not only its own account, but any children invoices linked under it. But that is not in there currently. Currently, it's 3 separate ones. So the email that goes out to them, the parent, is going to be detailed specifically to whatever child account it is linked to. And that is developed primarily for QuickBooks Online accounts. It is also available in QuickBooks Desktop, though. So in order to be consistent for us, when you go into your QuickBooks Desktop connected account, you would need to go to the settings menu and then go to the account menu. And there is a new setting called Bill with Customer. And that option, if you want to allow that, would need to be able to be checked so that you have the option then to either bill it with the parent or bill it with the child. Bill with customer means you're allowed to send the invoice to the customer child account if you would like to. If you uncheck this, then all invoices will always go to the parent. Okay, so be careful with that setting and how you want that set when you're connected to a QuickBooks Desktop account. Next, back under the settings menu again, so let's talk about the notifications menu because that's a new menu under settings. That gives you guys the ability to blind carbon copy other user logins to certain types of information. You normally, under your email settings, you're going to put a blind CC email address that gets a copy of every email that goes outside of Recur360. Well, obviously, if you have user logins, you might want to copy them on certain kinds of information that they would have access to. So under the notifications of the user that's logged in, so I'm logged in as Rachel, so if I want to blind carbon copy Rachel's email address on some things because she's in charge of the OOTB account and she needs to get any copy of any invoice overdue emails, or maybe if a customer fails a payment or if they make a payment successfully, I want her to get those notices also. Okay. So you pick and choose which kinds of things her address is going to have an additional blind carbon copy on, because again, whatever's set under the email, under the BCC email address is going to get a copy of everything. But individual users can get access to specific ones as well. And then the last thing is there are a number of user interface drop-down options that have changed. As you notice, when I go to the customers menu, if I go look at a customer profile, I no longer have all my buttons across the top to do things. I have one options menu drop-down, and I can make my recurring payment, do my invoice, do all my options here from there. I can also create a job underneath a customer directly from inside of Recur360, something you couldn't do before. You had to set it up with the structure with the colon and everything, but now you can create it automatically from inside of Recur in one menu choice there. And if you go to the settings, for instance, if you go to the some of the menus, when you go to like settings and you go to email, if you're scrolling now, you'll notice before the save button used to disappear. So now when I scroll down past a certain area, I'm still going to have my save button visible up here, and I don't have to worry about checking an option, then having to scroll way back up to the top of the page to hit the save button. Okay. So kind of some screen improvements and ability for you guys to easily see things and do things inside Recur360 there. Well, guys, that's kind of a real high level, as I said, overview of some of the new coming features. Those, I don't have an exact date on our release. We are obviously doing some serious testing here and running through some QC right now to make sure this is as tested out and ready as we can make it and as smooth a transition as possible. We will definitely not be releasing this before September the 1st. It's not something I want to put live the day before most of our clients' recurring invoices run, just in case there are any challenges. So it will definitely be after September 1st that this new update with the user logins, the editing existing invoices, and creating one-time invoices will be available. Jennifer, were there any questions or anything while we were going over everything inside of here? I know it was a lot of information to cover.
Yeah, thank you, Barb. So no questions came in as you were going through. I know for me personally, I was like just really tuned into what you were doing. So As we're starting to wrap up here, anyone who is on the line, if you have any questions, kind of let this information sort of sink in. If something pops up, definitely type that over to us right now. But yeah, nothing's come in so far. Barb, thanks so much for going over that. And I know that client satisfaction is such a high priority for us. So again, just echoing what Barb said, some of these things we want to make sure that they really are working seamlessly before we roll them out. So just giving that extra week or so even, I think, is super helpful versus making some of these changes live right before there's a ton of volume. So we always think about what we're doing, of course, and just a huge kudos to our developers for some of these things. Even the smallest thing, like having that save button scroll down with you, I think makes a world of a difference, especially when things are moving fast and, it's easy to forget little things like that. So awesome job to our development team. But we do have a couple questions now coming in. Thank you so much for those. The first one is there a limit to the number of users?
No, we do not place any limits by users or customers or transactions processed. So everything, you can add as many as you would like, and it's still the same flat fee as well, $72.
Okay, great. And then the next question, you mentioned the new feature of doing a one-time invoice. Can you still use that old method of just creating a recurring invoice that only recurs one time, or is this kind of a replacement?
It's meant to be a replacement in a more streamlined area. You could still obviously create a recurring invoice that recurs daily and only does it once. If you let it do it that old way, the normal is that it would automatically create that invoice overnight or when you press push transactions. So the advantage of the new one-time one is that you can do it all in one step and it makes that invoice right away instead of you having to wait or press push transactions.
Perfect. That's great. I guess if, some people kind of got used to that might be in their rhythm, but the new way is also a really great feature as well. So glad that was added. The next question is, will there be any updates so a customer can select multiple invoices to pay and have it only be one payment? Or make, say, a $500 payment that will cover a couple different invoices and then partial of an invoice?
From our pay online link or from our actual Recur360 screen. On the pay online link, the client can pay multiple invoices and partial invoices with one click. It actually, with the processor, gets processed as separate invoices so that we can do them as payments on each individual invoice and post that payment with the invoice into QuickBooks. There's no way currently right now in the collection center from the Recur360 interface area to pay multiple invoices at one time with one payment. But what you could do with that is create a recurring payment for $500 that only occurs once. And then that would post a $500 payment into QuickBooks. And you could split that into multiple invoices on the QuickBooks side then. So that's kind of our workaround for being able to pay multiple invoices inside of the user interface on the Recur360 side. Or I've also told some clients that they can go to the customer's pay online link. So if they go to the customer record here and they select that they want to go to their email link here, it'll open the portal just as if they were the customer. And if they have the card information, they could select multiple options here, put in the customer's card number, and pay multiple invoices in that way.
Great. So a couple different options for that. Thank you so much. That answered the question beautifully. So with the separate user logins that you went over, this new feature that we're kind of working on, if a company has, say, 40 different users and a couple of them will have the same permissions and some of them are going to be different, is that something that the client, the user, can send us at Recur360 a list and we'll create that, or is that something that the client will do and set those all up?
Typically, the client would do them and set them all up. It's something we haven't looked into to be able to have us set them for you. It's something we could discuss, though. I would have to talk to the developers about how involved that would be.
Okay.
Because basically right now would be us manually setting it up for you or you manually setting it up.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. Well, that looks to be all the questions that we have so far. Again, if we close out the webinar today and something comes to mind, definitely feel free to reach out to either myself or Barb. Clearly, Barb will be able to answer much more intelligently than I will, but I would be happy to put you in touch with Barb to make sure that your questions are answered, whether you are a current user, just getting used to some of these new features, or if you're interested in becoming a Recur360 user, we would love to introduce you to the product. So definitely reach out to us.
And you can get on our support chat too. So if
Yep,
you have
absolutely.
a question, then if you just want to pop off a quick one, we can reply back in a chat too.
Yep, most definitely. And then as I was going on here, we have another question that just came in, Barb, is can you still use, I'm sorry, when you edit an invoice in Recur360, will it automatically send to the client?
There is, when you edit, there is an option in here. So if I pull up an existing invoice for this cash shell customer as an example, when I go to my options and I choose to edit the invoice, okay, I now get to see that I'm going to be able to edit. What did that message say? I better read my messages that pop up there. Line items that Recur360 does not support. Oh, so this is that's a very old invoice. Let me get a current invoice here. That's what happens when you have accounts receivable open from way too long ago. If you edit this invoice, and it allows me to edit the invoice, before you save that invoice, there is a checkbox right here that says to email it to the client. So you would need to check this box to have it send the revised copy to the customer.
Perfect. Thank you. Great option. All right. So, yep, again, if you do have any questions, or you can reach out to Barb or myself, you can use our live chat that's on the site. Someone is there almost always, I would say, to answer your questions in our hours. But any other final things, Barb, that you wanted to touch on before we wrap up today?
No, I think that's kind of been our big work, and our big push lately has been to be able to get the user restrictions in and be able to edit invoices. It's really designed now for the capabilities that you could potentially have one of your accounts receivable people who might strictly use Recur360 and might not even have to get into QuickBooks anymore, because they can create customers now, they can create invoices, they can add late fees. The kind of only things we can't do are credit memos currently. So everything else they should be able to do from Recur360 and might not even need to get into your QuickBooks file for you.
Awesome. I'm sure that's huge for a lot of people. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, at this time, I am going to just take things back for just a moment as we close out here. I wanted to share with everybody a couple of our upcoming Technology Tuesdays. As I said, starting in September, we are able to offer CPE credit for the majority of our presentations. So you'll see when you go to register, there will be a mark that says if you can earn the credit for those or not, but most of them will be 1 CPE credit for attending live. So we hope that that adds a little value to you and you continue to join us for each and every presentation or those that interest you. Again, all of our Technology Tuesdays are recorded and posted to our site for on-demand viewing. So if you missed one or if you aren't able to attend any of these live, you can still go ahead and watch those on demand at your own convenience. So thank you in advance for joining us. We appreciate your time today and each and every week that you are able to listen in. If you have any questions about anything related to Technology Tuesday, if you have a topic that you would like to hear us present on, or if you yourself are an expert in an area and you would like to contribute, definitely get in touch with me. I'd be happy to add you to the schedule. And we hope to see you again soon. Thank you, Barb, and everyone who joined us. Hope you have a great day.